Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, everybody, depending on where you are joining from. It's a pleasure to spend the next roughly 30 minutes with you today. So, my name is Yuri Savershel. I'm the founder of Creative Supply. And today, the topic is 10 lessons from a decade of hotel branding. Some of you might know that we've been working extensively in the hospitality industry with projects everywhere from the smallest coffee shop possible in Switzerland all the way to the rebranding of a major European hotel chain. So today's agenda is very simple. We will go through the 10 different lessons. And to do that, we have made a selection of some real projects so that each time I will try to illustrate the key learning we had using projects we have worked on or we are working on at the moment. So what are the 10 lessons? So the first one is that destination dynamics are not avoidable. It doesn't matter where you go, if it's a country, a city, district, or even a street, there is a dynamic to that specific place. And by dynamic, I mean type of customers, price level, seasonality, potentially competitor types, etc. And it's very, very hard to go against the dynamic. We have a few exceptions, like the Burj Al Arab in Dubai or the first Mama Shelter in Paris, but there are more exceptions than the rules. And the build it and they will come logic is actually very difficult to do. In the case of Paris, it means that every neighborhood has a bit of a different expectations on what you can do. Typically, luxury is mainly in the Golden Triangle, as it's known, and it would be very difficult to do it outside of it. We've tried, trust me. Now, doesn't mean that every hotel in one neighborhood or district or arrondissement, for example, would need to be the same, or would they need to be branded the same way? Well, of course not. To give you an example, we worked a while back for a boutique luxury project located where you see the little orange dot, which was literally steps away from the Élysée Palace in Paris. And we had a very small hotel, not with no spa, no restaurant, etc. So we couldn't play the traditional luxury cards that are being used in that neighborhood. So we came up with the idea of slow luxury, and we built up an entire brand around a new vision for luxury, a luxury which is about time, space, and silence. So we respected that destination dynamic, but we didn't try to overdo them, right? We played along with them. And the project was very well received as something fresher, younger, and different without alienating traditional customers coming to the 8th district in Paris. The second one is talking about press and about visibility in the media. It's the dream of every hotelier or hotel brand out there to be featured for free by media and global media if possible. The good news is it's not that difficult to get, but you need to have the right story, which means you need to think like a journalist. Opening a hotel is a story good enough for local news, of course, or global news if your hotel is like absolutely giant, like the Atlantis in Dubai. But if you have a normal 50, 100, 200, 300 room hotel somewhere, the opening story will not be enough. You need a story that needs to be rooted in something really, really new. You're the first one to do something, would be one way to do it. Or you are in the zeitgeist of the moment, which means there's a trend. Maybe at the moment, people speak a lot about longevity, for example, in which case your hotel would be picked up by that wave. Or you speak about your heritage. Now, heritage, maybe you don't have it. So potentially you can invent it or buy it. Possible, but tricky. Zeitgeist, it's tricky because longevity is something people speak about today. Will they speak about this in 5 years? Maybe not. But in 5 years, you will not be renovating your hotel. So how do we make sure that this is still relevant from a storytelling point of view? And novelty is great, but then you need to find ways to keep on having novelties as you go. Because you might be the first one to have a pool with a cinema, but good chances that you won't have that advantages a long time in the row. So originality payoff is the third lesson we have. And as many of you know, The hotel industry and the real estate industry is more on the conservative side if you look at the overall industry. And sometimes bringing up really crazy ideas is a bit frowned upon or welcomed with a little bit of skepticism. And actually, we found out that you can really be much more original and much more crazy than you think you can. And people will actually appreciate that. And it won't damage your business in the way you would expect. And the example I'd like to share is actually a very old project. It's almost 10 years, actually. And this was a two-star hotel, very small property in the 5th arrondissement in Paris. And the picture you saw is a picture I took when we did the site visit back then. That was the breakfast room, believe it. And there was the whole question of what do we do with the basement? There's no light, it's not nice. What can we do with it? And what is even the brand that we should build around that place? And what we invented was a place called French Theory, which is a nod to the philosopher of the time living in the neighborhood. And French Theory is a relay of local culture. So it's not just a hotel, it's also a recording room. And you see here in the basement a picture of the converted area, which has become a recording room. And the thing is, it actually attracted a lot of artists that actually needed a place to record. And we found out during our research phase that there was a lot of radio station around it that actually didn't have enough capacity for the recording room. So we built that actually very original idea on real demand existing. And that has allowed French Theory to lift itself up from the two-star hotel scene in Paris, which is, as you can imagine, not very exciting, and actually become a culturally relevant places. From a recording room in the basement to theater show in the cafe to the staircase that become a gallery, and even the room were used for cinema screening. So pretty crazy, but originally it pays off. Nobody will come back to you saying, oh, that was too original. And if there is still some of you who wonder whether you need the word hotel in your hotel name, you don't. French Theory doesn't have hotel in it, and people never got lost trying to find it on Google Maps. And the Times actually seems to agree about this, talking about favorite with Archetype, not least for its in-house recording studio, a great base for your next Parisian adventure. At the end of the day, that's what you want, that you become the base for the next Parisian adventure. So this is a project that I'd like to share with you, which is at least 15 years old, actually more than a decade, and to express the idea that the lesson that interior design does not make a hospitality concept. So very few people know about this project, but around in 2011, 2012, Kempinski Hotels decided to launch a new budget brand for what was called back then emerging markets, read China. And the concept was called Tangram. And they developed everything in a theoretical concept, which means there was no location. So everything was defined, the color scheme, the spacing on the signage, how should the welcoming desk be, there should be a shop in there and a vending machine. Everything had been really, really thought through to the detail. And the first property was in Beijing. And I was part back then on the team that was meant to implement the brand, implement the concept first in Beijing. It turned out that a lot of the ideas that were defined in theory as design elements were not possible, or we could not develop them exactly, or they didn't look the way they were meant to look. And then after that, we had to open the second hotel, which was in Erbil in Iraq. And so I did the implementation of a Tangram hotel in Erbil in Iraq, but the problem is that the hotel was already decorated. So all we had to do was put a logo on the roof. So the essence of Tangram was lost because the entire brand and the entire concept was based on interior design. So if your brand is based on interior design, either you are capable to really deliver it, or you should not base your brand on interior design. But even if you do, how often do you renovate a hotel? every 15, 20, 25, 30 years if you're in Geneva. And that means that your brand is never going to last that just based on interior design property. So start with the brand, start with the positioning, start with your story, build up something that can evolve with time, and then have interior design be one aspect of that brand, not the other way around. Sounds obvious, but about 50% of the projects we're involved with, the interior design is set and all it needs is storytelling. But that's a bit late for that, isn't it? The fifth lesson we got, and I love this one, especially in the age of ultra digital and ultra AI, is that we still found our best ideas when it comes to brands offline or in places that you cannot find easily on Google or Pinterest or Instagram. And I think the main reason for that is simply that if you go where nobody else is looking, you're going to find things that nobody else has, as simple as this. And it means you need to dig a lot. And that's something that in our work sometimes is a bit difficult to convince clients for, because obviously you need to express that, well, you might find something which might be gold, or you might find absolutely nothing. And it will be a lot of time spent looking for something that doesn't exist. Luckily, in this project that we are working on at the moment in Épernay, so Épernay is the capital of Champagne, so to speak, in France, we're working on a new building. So it's a new hotel, restaurant, spa, the whole thing, in a traditional place. So it's a new building in a very conservative and traditional place, Épernay, Champagne region. So we needed to find a brand and a name that kind of resonates with the place. So we digged a lot in the archives of Épernay, the Champagne region, and we found those very old maps of Épernay in the archives. And on those archives, we found that the street that is now the main street of Épernay, called Avenue de Champagne, used to be called 200, 300 years ago, Rue de la Folie, which means streets of craziness. And we thought this is such an incredible name because we could call the hotel Rue de la Folie, which would create something completely new from a look and feel point of view, and at the same time, it is as deeply rooted in the place as you could be. We could never have found that idea just by finding inspiration online or on Instagram. The only way to get there was to do the hard work and to find those mini insights about Épernay. And that has been used. And there's so many projects. French Theory is another example of it. Mona, that some of you might know in Montreux. All those brands were born out of deep research in the offline worlds. So the 6 lessons, and I think this one is going to talk to some of you who are either owning hotels or owner reps or working in development. And it's a very basic rule, but it's forgotten sometimes. If you don't have the owner buy-in, whoever is the owner, the project is never going to be a success. And sometimes the best project is not the best project for the agency or the creative project. The best project is the one that the owner feels comfortable with and can actually deliver. And we learned this a bit the hard way when we took care of the rebranding of Vienna International at the time. Vienna International was the largest Austrian hotel brand. I think it was about 40 hotels spread all around Europe. And the logos you see on the screen are actually some of the properties they had. It was a big mess from brand standpoint because every hotel has its own name, its own look, its own story, and we wanted to bring all of this together in one name. So after visiting a lot of the hotels, analyzing the case, etc., we made a recommendation to call this whole new Vienna International, which sounded a bit like an airport. We proposed to call it Via Hotels. We thought it was a very smart idea because via means, the roads in Latin, so it connects all the hotels together. It has this notion of journey and of travel. Plus, it has V and I from Vienna International and A for Austria built in. So Via was for us a no-brainer. It was a short name. We could trademark it, which surprised us actually. But we thought Via Hotels would be the perfect name for Vienna International. Except that we never involved the board in any of our research. We never talked to them. We never interviewed them. We never asked what they thought about this whole thing. We just worked directly with the management team, but not the board. So when we presented the name, well, there was a bit of unsettlement on the board side because they felt that this was being pushed down their throat, even though arguably this was an honestly amazing solution for the rebranding project. But the board didn't approve it. So we are back to the drawing board, basically, where we had to come up with a completely different name, and this time involving the board earlier on. So we landed with something that actually worked quite well as well, Vienna House. And with the house, we build up the metaphor that a house has a family, and in a family you have the kids and the grandparents, and they're all different, but they have the same DNA. And that metaphor of house helped us a lot, actually, in implementing that brand across nearly 40 hotels. So was it good or bad that we ended up with Vienna House? I don't know. We will never know. Opportunity cost, maybe. But what's sure is that if you don't involve the owner from the get-go of any of those type of projects, it's not gonna fly. And branding is something that owners and board actually care a lot about. Believe it or not, people get very emotional about namings. Number 7, and this is something we've been experiencing a lot lately in the past 2-3 years, is the potential of retail in hotel. So when you think retail in hotel, you might think, this little vitrine that you have in the corridor advertising some local shops, or maybe some sort of hotel shop somewhere that just sells you, the bathrobe with the logo of the hotel for completely overpriced. But we always thought retail can be so much more because you have a captive audience, they come to your hotel or your cafe or your restaurant, and they are here and they're going to spend not just 2 minutes, they're going to spend hours with you. So if you have a retail concept that is really unique, that they cannot find anywhere else online, and that taps into the moment and the sense of place, it becomes really magical. And the example I like to share with you is a project we just finished a couple of weeks ago, actually. It's a small boutique hotel with a coffee shop downstairs in the city of Murten-Mora in Switzerland. And Murten-Mora is a medieval town. It's very pretty, very cute, very traditional. And together with the owner, we made the call to go, almost against the destination dynamics, to actually make kind of almost a trendy coffee shop brand called the Corn House, because the place was called the Corn House. And the owner, Gilles, was very convinced that there's a lot of locals around it that would love to have a cool place in Murten. And it's not just for the tourists. So we followed his intuition a lot, I must say, on this project. And we developed the Corn House like a cool urban coffee shop brand. And on top of this, we built up a retail offering, making t-shirts that reads Made in Mora. Believe it or not, in 1 week, we sold out the entire stock of t-shirts because the locals bought it. They were so proud to be able to wear a cool t-shirt that says, "We are made in Mora." And we did the same with the coffee pack. We call them Morabica, which is a wordplay on Mora and Arabica, which also is being very successful. And then we have those huge tote bag called Downtown Murten, which is obviously a bit taking the piece because you are downtown Paris, London, or New York. You're not downtown Murten. It's like 2 streets. But that play, that sense of humor resonated with the locals and is starting to resonate with the tourists that come, thinking that it's actually a very original souvenir. So retail allows you to create a layer of emotional connection with people if it's thought through, but also so it creates potentially a small revenue line. I mean, a couple of thousands per year, maybe 10, 20 if you're good. More importantly, it becomes a source for Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok. It becomes a source of marketing because people love to take pictures of branded things because it's a very quick way to give a sense of place. So retail drives value if you don't do it in a generic manner. If you just sell the thing that you can find the shop next door with a 25% markup, this is not called adding value. This is called destroying value. Number 8. So the lesson number 8 is that photography and video can really not be an afterthought. Think about it. If you sell hotel rooms, you are not selling the physical room. You are actually selling a picture. You are like an e-commerce brand. you don't sell a dress, you sell a picture of the dress, because by the time people receive the dress in their home, well, the purchase is done, the sales is done. Same goes with hotel. By the time people enter your lobby, they have already been sold, they already paid their room. So your pictures are arguably almost more important than your interior, or let's put it that way, at the same level, because you are selling people on the pictures. Too often, the hotel video or the hotel photo shoot is the last thing that happened before the opening, because obviously you need a whole room to be decorated. And that's that point that the projects start to run out of funds. So people start to kind of cut a little bit on the budget of that part. And that's criminal, because you end up spending, honestly, millions on a refurbishment, for example, but then you're just gonna try to save 5,000 euros on the photo shoot, while actually you need those photos as the actual selling tool. And what you see here on the photo is a photo shoot for which I must say, and I must be very thankful to the client, we could really do a proper full shoot. And this is Mona in Montreux. It's a concept around a cruise without leaving the shore, as we call it. And we wanted what we call the media shoot. We always need that one photo that kind of shows the concept. So you feel the leisure aspect of it with the sun deck. You see the lake, the mountain, this summer vibe with those types of tree. So you understand it's a cruise without leaving the shore. Small anecdote, this photo was actually much more expensive than planned, because it's a drone photo actually, and the seagulls around it thought that the drone was a very interesting animal, so they decided to tear down one of the drones. So we lost one drone in the process of that shoot. So we had to send a second one in order to be able to capture that one photo that actually was used across the media, from Elle India to Lonely Planet and Le Temps in Geneva. So I think it was worth losing one drone. Details, details, details. This is our 9th lesson. It's easy to come up with a logo and put it on the front door, and maybe you have a do not disturb sign. But if you think about it, there's so many details in a hotel. There's the obvious one, like the room key cards, but then maybe you have a small words for your beauty kit. And maybe your Wi-Fi password could be called something better than Paris 2025. If people are waiting at the elevator, you maybe want to acknowledge the fact that the waiting is a bit long, or that they can take the stairs. If they enter the elevator and they have this social awkwardness, you might want to come up with something on the floor or on the ceiling, or on the mirror, that gets people to smile about it. Even a boutique hotel can easily have 25 to 35 different touch points that can be branded and make a difference. Which means don't just think about it as a series of stuff you need to print. Think about each of the elements as a way to tell your story better. And this thing, you do them once and then you use them for the next 20 years if you're good, right? So it's kind of an investment in the long term. If you don't do that, you end up having a logo on the facade, and once people enter it, the connection with the brand is almost lost. But you want to hear the tone of voice, maybe the sound, the interior design, of course, needs to connect with this, etc. So details is actually what makes the difference. And we've seen this over and over and again with hotels for which we developed a high-level brand and a couple of elements, versus hotels for which we would actually control the entire experience. And that makes a huge, huge difference in the guest experience, fundamentally. So the last lesson for today is that at the beginning of such a branding project, typically you speak to the owner, maybe the management team, the architect, of course, the interior designer, potentially. There's a lot of people who are involved in that branding project, and unfortunately, they are not the frontline staff. And there's always that moment. I'm a big advocate of involving the frontline staff at the very beginning of the project, so we understand what is their operational reality, so that whatever is branded is actually can be delivered by the staff, because it's very easy to come up with fancy PowerPoint that nobody can deliver on the ground. This aside, you need that moment where you start to involve them. And I have a funny anecdote about this. Is what you see on the screen is the Terrace Hotel. Is the first project we ever did in Paris. So it has a special place in my heart. And we did the entire rebranding of that kind of heritage hotel. And on the top floor, we made the recommendation, and we had to fight a lot with the owner for this because he wasn't too sure about this, to actually make a kind of roof restaurant with a beautiful view on the Eiffel Tower. And I remember that when we presented that project actually quite late to the entire staff of the hotel, explaining to them that we would be removing hotel room, I think about 4 hotel rooms in the top floor, and replacing them with a restaurant, one of the housekeepers raised a hand and asked, if you remove all those rooms, does that mean that we'll have less room to clean and that we'll have less work? And that for me was a big shock because it really took me by surprise because I never thought that this would be a question. I was lost in explaining the story, the positioning, the potential of the restaurant, the role it would have. But the reality of the housekeeping staff was, how many rooms do I have to clean next month? So involving the staff on board, making sure they understand obviously the story, the positioning in a simple way, but also connecting this to their own reality is, I would argue, almost more important, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great the hotel is branded. If your housekeeping is not happy to be there or doesn't get what's going on or resent management or the marketing people, it's not going to help. So involving the staff is the way to success. Luckily, the Terrace Hotel is extremely well managed by Romain Binet and the Biography Group, and they've done an incredible job at pulling out one of the best view in Paris for a restaurant. All right, so 10 lessons. Hopefully this was kind of insightful for you guys. If I summarize them, destination dynamics, don't mess up with them. You need a story for your hotel. That's not just, we have a new hotel. That's not a story, that's a news. Originality payoff. If you dare to go until here, go 10% more. It's not gonna hurt, but your CFO will thank you for it because you're gonna drive value. Interior design is great, super important, but it's not your concept. It's not your brand. Go offline, especially today in this uber digitalized world, to find ideas. Get your owners on board, get them to understand, get them to support this, or be the owner and make sure you understand and support this. Consider retail. Even if you have 3 rooms, you can do retail and you can drive value in both revenue and marketing for it. Photography and videos are not an afterthought. They are your selling tool. Detail. If you go through the hassle of do a branding, don't cut the corner on detail, or just honestly don't do it at all. And finally, make sure the service staff must be on board. So those are, I think, the kind of 10 key learnings we had throughout all those branding projects we've had, where I could say they are common for all the projects we've worked on. Obviously, you will have learnings that are specific to each project. Next webinar, just so you know, it's going to be on coffee shop. So going to something very niche. It's on the 7th of October. I'll make sure you get an email to sign up if you have any interested for it. And we are launching something completely new, actually. We decided to create a WhatsApp group called the Brand Shift, where we share weekly insights, ideas, case studies, news we read, cool projects, not in an advertising way, actually, but really like to have that place where we can share kind of with our global audience all the cool things happening in the world of branding. So we literally created this last week. So feel free to join. And this way you'll be able to receive really cool insight on the world of branding, because there's just so much happening right now. And this is my 1 minute begging time, and some of you know about this. Obviously, we love to create value for all of you in the webinar, and we rely so much on word of mouth. So if you guys take a couple of seconds, because it's really a couple of seconds, to just scan the QR code, or I'll put in the chat the link to leave us a review on Google Maps, this would be really, really, really amazing. And my social media team would really thank me for that. So yeah. And with my begging time, but if you leave us a review, that would be really amazing. So thank you in advance for that. And now we have the time for the part that's always interesting and full of surprise, which is the Q&A. So let me pick up the chat now, and I will take the questions as they come. So give me a sec. So any questions you have, feel free to put them in the Okay, I see there's one here from Dominica. Let me show it. So how do you approach balancing the timeless side of hotel branding with the need to stay fresh and current? Yeah, this is an excellent question, because typically hotel branding follows real estate cycles, which means it's every 10 to 15 to 20 year story. The way we look at it is that you need to have those fundamental elements, things that really should not move for the next 20 years. And then you need to have the part that's a bit more flexible in the way we execute it. And that way we can stay relevant and stay fresh. Photography typically should happen at least once a year. Anyway, you need new materials for social medias, etc. So that's another way to obviously stay fresh and current. I think those are the two main ways to do this. We have a very timeless way to look at this. We don't like to do too trendy things, generally speaking, because they get a lot of visibility, but then they become fads. And now, with a decade of hotel branding, we see hotel projects that haven't aged that much by actually sticking to more timeless design as much as we could. What is something to say to get owners on board? That story is important to thread into the DNA of their project. It's a hard one if the owner doesn't understand that. But, I think the best way, probably, if you are starting from zero, is to take the owner to a hotel they really, really like. And by definition, if they like that hotel, it's not going to be some basic hotel. It's going to be a hotel that has something. And then you can use, actually, we have this model called hospitality. We've written a handbook about it, the Hospitality Concept Handbook, and to show them how a central idea, maybe new luxury or bobo luxury, etc., is actually influencing all the elements of the real estate. And once they see that connection, it's a bit an idea they cannot forget. So I would try to use an existing project and show them how it's done, rather than convincing them that storytelling is an important thing, because storytelling sounds a bit like marketing blah blah, to be honest. It's not, but that's how it sounds. So I would rather start from the real estate. What are some cringy hotel trends that you wish would go away? Oh, this is a really good question. I have no idea. I think the most cringy is the home away from home. I just cannot hear that sentence anymore. I mean, if you want to be home, just be home. If you want to be away, you probably want to be somewhere else. But it's not necessarily cringy. I think a lot of people are speaking about longevity at the moment, but nobody has cracked it from a branding point of view or even a concept point of view. And I think the inspired by local story is dead. This was Hoxton 10 years ago. I think if you're launching today a hotel that is claiming to be inspired by the locals, you sound like a 2015 hotels. And bear in mind, what you do brand now probably is going to be launched in 2-3 years, depending on your hotel project. So you need something that's future-proof. There's the next one. It's a long one. Let's see if it shows all. What is your point of view regarding established hotel brands, Ritz-Carlton, Six Sense, etc., as their brands are being built more and more in emerging markets? Yeah, emerging market today, leading over the world tomorrow. Sometimes 2-3 in the same city. How can they stay distinctive while keeping the essence of these brands? They can't. The reality is they cannot, because you have a conflict between development and growing a brand and protecting a brand. And in a typical hotel company, those are two different teams. You have a development team that has as a goal to sign hotels and sign deals. That's their incentive. And then you have probably a marketing or branding team that is there to keep the essence of the brand. But some brands, let me name one, for example, Mama Shelter was incredible when it first started in Paris. As it grew in so many destinations, and now Accor is very much using a cookie cutter strategy, it is damaging the brand because the brand has nothing new to say. So I think it's very, very hard. The only way to do it is to keep coming up with new things and evolving the brand. But that's something that, if you buy a brand to grow it, you have zero incentive in doing, because the whole point is you buy a brand that you can replicate everywhere else. So short term, it doesn't matter. Long term, your brand is going to get eroded. I mean, check brands like Sheraton or Le Méridien, and then you understand what I mean. Those brands had really something 20 years ago, but today they are like byproducts. But Le Méridien has actually so much potential. You have a French story, a Mediterranean story, etc. There's so much you could do, but that's not just updating your logo, right? The brand has to go deeper than that. Hopefully, I have answered your question, Andy. With hotels often having multiple stakeholders, how do you handle decision making when there are too many voices? Yeah, this is a very good question. It's indeed very common. The way to do it is to make sure that the core decision maker, be the owner or the management team or the CEO, is the first brand advocate, because then you use the brand as a filter mechanism and as a criteria. If you don't have a brand, those discussions become very much taste discussion. I like pink, I like blue for the cushion. My friend think we should have an open kitchen. My friend think we should have a closed kitchen. You have those anyway, but if you have a strong brand and concept from the get-go, you can always come back to it and say, hey, wait a second. We agree we would do heritage Spanish. What you are saying is really cool, but it sounds like innovative Italian, right? So maybe we should go back to our initial brand. So the brand is actually your safety net, 100%. I'll show the WhatsApp group code while someone is asking me. Yeah, it's here today, gone tomorrow. Let's see if there's other questions. Okay, here there was this one before. Sometimes going viral can be a double-edged sword. Will it drive traffic and awareness to a brand or hotel in this case? It may also reduce the service or quality of the experiences. How can a hotel ensure it has an established foundation to weather a viral storm? It's funny, I had a discussion like this with the CEO of PKF Hospitality in our previous podcast, where we had different view. I advocate for actually very soft openings and kind of gradually build it up, a bit like a minimum viable product, which allows you to evolve the hotel as it go. If you create that crazy viral buzz, especially at opening level, the chances that the people are disappointed or that operations cannot deliver is too big, and then you fail it. So you better, as it in a startup way, I guess, you better have it slowly and building up so that you can adapt your operations to your brand. Viral is good, but how do you ensure that you have something to say in the next 5 years is honestly much more important than being a trending hashtag on TikTok this week. Because you might get suddenly 20 Koreans that have seen a cool TikTok this week, amazing. But then how do you get them, the next 20 Koreans, to come to your hotel the week after and the week after? And that, I think, is where the attention should be more than pure virality. Okay, there's one here. How do you see AI and new tech affecting the way hotels think about brand identity and guest experience? So we spoke a little bit about this in our last webinar, actually. The fundamentals are not going to change. My gut feeling is that most of the innovation will happen on the back of the house side, which means the channel manager will finally be able to connect with the booking engines and all of these things that are manual work, typically a reception or reservation team. You will be able to make this much more seamless, which means the staff will have more time for the guests. That's one part of it. On the other hand, I think we'll see more and more human-less hospitality. Basically, tech enables you not to have staff anymore. And the question is going to be, how high in luxury can we go with human-less hospitality? I personally dream to do a human-less project that's very, very high-end and see how we can bring luxury without necessarily the human touch, which is always seen as the archetype of hotel luxury. So I think this is going to change it a lot. But then a lot of things are very gimmicky, like choosing your color when you enter your room and things like that. I don't think this is the future of hotels, even if it's AI empowered. I can see one more. Would you argue that to deliver a successful brand, the brand designer needs to babysit a project even after the opening and during the operation? Would brand audit mystery guests be a must for the original brand consistent? I mean, especially if it's the first one of a brand that you launch, you have to babysit, to use your term, it all the way through. It's the only way, because mistakes will always happen. If it's the second one or the third one and you are starting to be in a scale level, you don't need to be, because technically the learnings have been achieved in the first one, most of it at least. Mystery audits, personally think they're a bit ridiculous, because you are testing things that nobody cares about. Like someone should pick up the phone in 2 rings. I think that's a standard in a 5-star hotel. But at the end of the day, if someone picks up the ring in 4 rings and they're actually really nice and help you, it's much more important than if they pick up the phone in 2 rings and are unhelpful. So mystery audit, I'm not sure, but seeing the hotel in operations as you go and seeing how things could be improved, yes, 100% for sure. So more like spot check than actual mystery audits, which is important for ranking and COO of a hotel company, I understand. From a branding point of view, I don't think you get so much out of it. I think there is one here. Let me try and don't miss it. Yeah. You mentioned that originality and a strong story are key for hotel concept. In your experience, how can smell, intimate space, whether a boutique hotel or even a cultural salon, best balance storytelling and execution so that guests don't just see the design but really feel the concept? Yeah, smell is completely underused in hotels. Top of my mind, I can think about Shangri-La. And Shangri-La is one of the few hotel brands that has the Shangri-La smell. And if you enter in the Shangri-La in Hong Kong or the Shangri-La in Shenzhen, the smell is the same. We see this a lot in retail, actually fashion retail, not so much in hotels. And I personally really like it because it gives you that sense of familiarity the minute you step in somewhere. So I think smell plays a huge role. We need to be more careful about it in guest rooms, obviously, because then taste comes a bit into play. But this is something that, supermarkets have been pumping smell of fresh bread next to bread aisles for years. I think it's about time hotel can do the same, and not just in the spa. Let me take the next one. Yep. Can you say more about human touch in the hotel experience? Where is it important and where is digital important? I think everything that can be done faster by digital should be done by digital, because there's nothing worse than to wait on a human when you know that something could be done faster digitally. Think check-in. And I spoke to the area manager of Baumier Hotel last week, actually, who told me that Baumier, that's very, very high in luxury, actually, they have online check-in, and most of the guests take a picture of their passport with their iPhone, and then when they arrive, their check-in is done. And this is luxury. Arriving in a hotel and still having to hear the key typing of the person who is checking you in makes absolutely no sense. Where you want to see a human is in those in-between moments. You're about to get out and it's raining and someone say, hey, by the way, it's going to be sunny after, but take an umbrella now. And that's something highly contextualized. That's very, very hard to do with technology, but also show the empathy and the connection. I think that's where human is important. Anything else, honestly, if you can do it digitally, do it digitally. It's a bit like, do you really need to call the reception to ask her what time is the breakfast? I have the feeling a chatbot could do that job better. Next one. I saw the comment on mystery audit. I was just wondering, out of all the people who stay at hotels, how many of them pick their hotel based on how cheap it is? Do you think that the main thing that makes them choose a room is the price? So, okay, let's be very clear. People if you take a city hotel, most people will first choose a hotel because of the location. Location is probably going to drive the base selection, regardless of concept, brand, price, whatever. Then they're going to narrow it down by looking at price and review, actually. And out of this final set that they have, maybe they have 2 or 3 hotels, they're going to start to dig a bit more into, does that hotel speak to me or not. And that's where the brand actually makes the difference. Of course, you might want to go to the W Hotel in Barcelona because you heard about it, it's a cool brand, but that's a very minority of the customers. So essentially what we are doing from a branding point of view is we're getting visibility of the hotel, but we are also fighting for that incremental moment where someone will choose you over the next one. We've seen this in many hotels where when you have the brand, the story right, you can drive the average rate by a couple of percentage points. Anywhere between 5 and 15% is realistic, actually. Anything above would require full refurbishment of your hotel to offer really a new types of product. Price will always be important. It will always be driven by supply and demand. I think what's more important is what do you offer for that price, and does your brand tell the right story for that price point? And I see so many hotels that have an honestly amazing locations and are not able to drive a high price point because they're just not attractive. And then you see hotels that sometimes have a bit off location. I'm thinking of a couple of hotels in Paris, actually in the suburbs, for example, or even if you think about Amman, completely off locations for some of them, that drives the value as well. So, I mean, it's a bit of an independent situation here. Okay, next one. There's a specific one, I think. How would you recommend a third-generation hotel furniture supply company utilize this principle to better help hoteliers achieve their internet brand impact? I would recommend this company to call Creative Supply, number one. Joke aside, I think it depends on the range of things you offer, but I think it's a lot about showing the value that your offering drives for the business and not just the usage, the utility it has. People need to furnish their restaurant with chairs, but how will yours actually make the difference? I think by selling individual pieces, it's different because it's price driven. As a supplier, if you speak about interior design and the overall concept, I think that's when you have probably a bit more chance, but to discuss further. In your experience, how long does a full branding project for, let's say, a medium-sized hotel usually take from first discovery to launch? So a branding project typically takes between 3 to 6 months, not because it takes 3 to 6 months to develop the brand, but because it takes time for all the people involved to be involved, to give the feedback, to validate, etc. So we're talking about 3 to 6 months. I think that would be standard. In theory, this can be done faster. If you have a small hotel and things are ready to move with one decision maker, it could be done in 2 months. And then if you have larger projects, they tend to, the main brand is done in, let's say, 4 or 5 months, but then the actual development of the hotel, if it's new built, for example, it's actually years. We have projects now that are meant to open in 2028. We have projects now that have been in the background working for, I think, 2 or 3 years. So there's not an active branding work, but a lot of branding details are not defined yet because they depend on construction. So, but I think if you have an existing hotel and you're just looking at rebranding it, I think 4 or 5 months of actual branding work and then probably 3 months of production. Because, if you start to have a tote bag and a new signage and all of this easily takes 3 to 4 months, depending on the size of your hotel, of course. Let me take probably one of the last one. How can a hotel's identity stay relevant when it comes to competing against others in the OTAs where the brand identity is very thin? Yeah, this is such a good question. Photography is one point, right? Because the picture I showed you before is actually from booking.com. So that's one way you would want to have it. Many guests will actually check your website to decide whether it's the right place or not. And then they will find out where the best price is. As simple as that. So you need your website for 2 things. 1, convince the people that you are the right hotel. 2, convince them that you are the right place for them to book. And those are 2 different things. So when we build hotel websites, we want to make sure about that people get really seduced by whatever they see and that they think that this hotel is worth coming and worth paying the price. At the same time, we want to make sure that people understand that you can get the best price there. And to be honest, once you have guests that have come once to your hotel, how do you make sure if you're a hotel where people come back, that they would come back to you directly? So what is the incentive that you have? Not just 25% or 20% on your next booking, but something different, something unique, something they would never be able to get anywhere else. And how do you make sure that their friends are coming back? If you're a hotel in the Maldives, I would make sure that every friend of the guest that stay in my hotel get an incentive to come to my hotel, because if I go to the Maldives, my friends can probably afford it too. So that's probably how I would look at this. All right, guys, I think that was a lot of questions. So thank you so much for this. It was really cool. It's always good to hear the questions of people and to know what is going through your mind. Once again, if you have literally 30 seconds of your time to leave us a review on Google Maps, this would really make our day. So thank you so much for this. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in our next webinar on coffee shop. And I will speak about trends in coffee shop branding, as well as show you a full case study of a project that we have delivered. So once again, thanks a lot for following Creative Supply, and hopefully see you in the next webinar, on a Zoom call, or who knows, maybe even in real life. Thank you very much and have a great end of the day. Bye-bye.